Bertong Kunat!
Daryong Dagol!
Ano tong balitang pinagkakalat mo dito sa baluarte ko, ha?
Anong balita?
Huwag ka na magmaang-maangan pa!
Ayun ba? Ha? Hindi ba totoo naman? Nasagi ang lunas sa COVID. Alam mo ba kung nasa naman kang mayaw? Nasa naga talaga yun. At higit sa lahat, fake news talaga yung ads sa Revolution.
Ungas ka ba? Ano ba pinagsasabi mo? Saan mo pinagkukuha yan?
Huh, syempre, nag-research ako, no? Sa Tuktuk University. Palibasok kasi at umugot ka na at laos, kaya hindi mo alam yun. Ano, ha?
Lord naman! Magpaulan ka naman ng katalinuhan!
Reliable source of information, sari-saring content na isinulat ng mga eksperto, mga librong di kalidad na abot hanggang sa doomsday, tumawag ka lang sa akin. By the way, hindi ako si Lord. Ako si Vimal.
O pre, tingnan mo to. Di ba sabi ko sa'yo totoong EDSA Revolution?
Oo nga, no? O tapos ito, wala pala talaga sa Naga ang bulkang Mayon.
Sabi ko sa'yo eh.
Good day, Kavibal, and welcome to our YouTube Live. For the discussion today, the topic will be on Academic Writing 101, Exploring the Fundamentals of Research Writing. Before we begin, please take note of the following reminders. Make sure you're registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.bibalgroup.com or eturu.org to generate your proof of attendance. Share the video using hashtag LearnAs1PH as our official hashtag to our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kavibal! And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker today. Mr. Joram Corcuera is a graduate of Bachelor in Secondary Education major in English at the Philippine Normal University in 2011. He obtained his Master of Arts major in Communication degree at the Ateneo de Manila University. Currently, he is taking his degree of Doctor of Philosophy major in English Language Studies at the University of Santo Tomas. He has been a teacher for almost a decade and has already taught English, literature, public speaking, and research classes. He also represented the Philippines in various international research conferences about education and communication. He has been delivering CPD training sessions and teacher seminars across the country for more than 3 years. He is also into journalism as he has already experienced handling a number of student publications in various schools and universities, including San Beda University and University of Santo Tomas. At present, he is working as a faculty member at the University of Santo Tomas Junior High School, where he teaches communication arts and journalism courses. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joram Kim Corcuera.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about a very important topic, something that will be very useful for beginning researchers. So this could be our student researchers from the grade 10 level in the junior high school, or even, of course, from the senior high school department, our grade 11 and grade 12 students. But not only the students that would benefit from today's webinar, but also the teachers, because nowadays, not only the professors in the college level are given research load, but even in the high school level, or even in the elementary level, teachers are already given research tasks, specifically action research, to be able to improve the way they teach and the way they handle their students. And that note, allow me to welcome you all to our session this afternoon titled Academic Writing 101, Exploring the Fundamentals of Research Writing. I am Mr. Joram Kim Corcuera, and I will be serving as your research speaker for this afternoon's session. So allow me to begin this webinar by discussing two important concepts or two big ideas that we're going to have. And the first word, of course, the first big idea would have to be academic. When we say academic, it's everything related to our work as teachers and to the things, of course, that students submit for educational purposes. Moreover, if we say academic, some students or even some other members of the educational community would experience a great deal of anxiety whenever they hear this word. They would feel pressured. They would feel, okay, this is another task that I have to finish. Moreover, if we connect the term academic to the second big idea, which is research, much more that students would somehow feel, okay, this is going to be very challenging. Even teachers, if we say we're given a research task, we understand that it's going to take a lot of time, and this is something that we cannot finish overnight. Because we understand that research would refer to any formal or informal endeavor undertaken to fill a knowledge gap, expand existing information, or generate new knowledge. In some manner, we can say that research really involves a lot of exploration and investigation, which definitely would be a rigorous task because you have to prepare a comprehensive literature review. You have, of course, to gather data, analyze them, which would really be time consuming. But at the end of the day, we understand that research is something very important, especially right now that we are in the digital age, that we are in the 21st century, where we welcome the new innovations, new strategies, new techniques, of course, in the field of education. And whenever we talk about academic research, whenever we talk about these two big ideas, and we're given this task, the one of the biggest questions would be, how do we prepare a research paper? How do we write a research paper? Is it similar with just writing a personal letter? Of course, the answer there is a big no. Why no? Because when we talk about academic writing and we talk about research writing, we have to understand that this is always a product of formal writing. As you can see, right now in your screen, I'm actually showing to you an infographic prepared by grammar.net, highlighting the differences of formal and informal writing. So if it's informal writing, it's just a matter of citing your thoughts, your opinions, without paying attention to the academic writing conventions. But if you talk about formal writing or academic writing, of course, there are a lot of things that you have to be able to observe. What are those things? Number one, no colloquialism. Which means, this will cover slangs, idiomatic expressions. You have to avoid all those things, and other English phrases or expressions that are commonly used. These things are not welcome, in research writing or even in any other form of academic writing. Okay? Number two, no imperatives. When I say imperatives, these are the terms, the phrases that would refer to expressing command or request, showing authority. So this is also something that you should not be observing in doing the research paper, because here you're doing formal writing. Number three, no contractions. So let's say, for example, the word cannot. You have to type it and you have to spell it cannot, and you cannot just say can and then apostrophe T. And same thing with the others. Okay? Avoid short, choppy sentences, meaning to say, okay, you have to understand, in order for you to be able to observe a formal tone, a polite tone, a refined one, you have to understand that it really requires more effort to compose sentences for academic writing or for research writing, because there should be a smooth flow of ideas, no? Everything should be organized, no? And it cannot just be presented, okay, these are the data that I have. No, you have, of course, to plan things. No, that's why you would be able to avoid these short, choppy sentences. Next, of course, you have to avoid directly addressing your reader. So here, formal writing, academic writing, you use, of course, third person point of view. So you have to avoid using pronouns like you, second point of view, and of course, second person point of view, and I, first person point of view. Because you have to understand that formal writing, academic writing, and research writing, should always be expressed and written using, of course, the third person. Okay, so lastly, of course, mind your spelling and punctuation grammar. So these errors will definitely, turn off your audience, your readers, and would make you less credible in their eyes. And especially in research writing, you have to observe formality, and you have to proofread your paper from time to time to avoid, of course, committing grammatical errors, punctuation errors, capitalization errors, and the like. Although admittedly, this is something na nangyayari naman talaga. But of course, if you're really going to proofread, you can also hire a style reader towards the end, then these things could really be avoided. So these are just some of the many ways, of course, to observe formal writing. But today, of course, this is what we're really going to talk about, how we can, of course, not only differentiate formal and informal writing, but how we can, of course, observe the academic writing conventions to be able to produce a good research paper. So on that note, let us define now academic writing. So what is academic writing? Academic writing is the formal writing style employed by universities and colleges. It is what professors and academic researchers use to compose scholarly materials and what is expected of students in the classroom. In the high school level, we actually teach academic writing in the grade 10 level. English 10 specifically. This is the case for most schools, although some schools also offer academic writing classes. In fact, in the graduate school, some schools actually require their graduate students to have academic writing classes, because this is something that would be very useful for them in doing their theses and their dissertation. But of course, in the senior high school, this is also something that is being taught. May mga classes tayo, of course, na nakatutok din talaga sa research writing and sa academic writing. Because when you say academic writing, we also have to understand that this is not just about research writing. It is not all about preparing the abstract, preparing the annotated bibliography, preparing academic journal articles, but this could be about preparing book reports, writing essays, constructing literary criticism outputs, and then the like. But of course, any formal writing, lalo na yung mga sinusulat natin sa school na pinapasa ng mga bata, of course, sa teachers nila, that would exclude, of course, yung mga outputs like for poetry, kadalasan po talaga, this, of course, should be written, using and following, of course, the conventions, na tinuturo natin ngayon sa academic writing, right? So, moreover, when you say academic writing, it differs from writing in other personal contexts in many ways. But allow me to highlight 3 different things. 1, academic writing is formal writing that adheres strictly to grammar and punctuation rules. Actually, not only grammar and punctuation rules, but also the structure and the format given by the teacher. In my case, ako po, whenever I give tasks to my students, I often give them templates. But if there are no templates given, kung magbibigay ka ng format, of course, the students must understand that this is part of the things that they have to follow. So academic writing discourages superficial writing because here, authors must conduct in-depth research on their chosen topic by, of course, reading a lot of existing literature reviews or existing papers and analyze, of course, the data that are being presented, so that, of course, you will be able to provide not only an academic paper that is, of course, that has no grammar, and punctuation error, but of course, the content is also impressive. Number 2, in academic writing, references to previously published authors are actually required. That's why in the high school level, of course, one of the things that are being taught in the junior high school specifically, and of course in the senior high school, would be how to do citations, be it in-text citations or of course how to come up with a reference list, no, of bibliography, right? Because academic writing would include citations of published authors in the field to substantiate the author's claims and demonstrate, of course, his or her depth of knowledge about the topic that he or she is discussing in his or in her paper. Right? So that's something, of course, that students must learn. I hope, no, that this would be a practice not only in English class, but even in other classes, so that, of course, there would be consistency. Okay? And number 3, students are expected to delve into theories, concepts, and philosophies in academic writing, which emphasizes abstract concepts. Here, we have to understand that the student, okay, the authors themselves, no, they need to emphasize the information that they plan, of course, to discuss, to spread, to present in their paper. They must also be able to provide, no, alternative explanations for each phenomenon that they're trying to discuss. They may also try to take a look at how the theories, no, played roles, no, in the papers that they're going to cite, no, in their papers, because these things may allow them to understand things in a deeper manner. Right? So now that we are able, of course, to note the differences of academic writing to informal writing, to personal writing, and other contexts, no, let us try to discuss now what are the main purposes of academic writing. There are a lot of purposes, no? But right now I have here 4 main purposes. So 1, to report on a piece of the research conducted by the writer. And I think this has been one of the most common, no? Things that we actually know, that if it's research writing, then automatically it's academic writing. It's never creative writing, right? Number 2, to respond to a question the writer has been asked, of course, or selected. Number 3, to discuss a topic of mutual interest and provide the author's view. And number 4, to synthesize the research of others on a subject. So if we're going to combine all these purposes, we can actually say that academic writing is a strategy, no, for creating, for teaching, no, for learning, codifying, okay, of course, academic information, insights, ideologies, okay, and other pertinent information. Because this is, of course, necessary to be able to write a discipline-specific paper and output, no? Which is, of course, what we demand from our students. Okay? We also have to understand that we would want our students to become critical thinkers. We also want them to become effective communicators. And one of the many things, no, that would be very important for them to really become critical thinkers, problem solvers, effective communicators, and then the like, is really, of course, to be able to observe and to know, no, how to write a paper following the academic writing conventions. In other words, by actually supporting their thoughts with factual evidence, by actually presenting a lot of information based on clear, no, written in a very clear manner, concise, of course, concise ang data, brevity is observed, and then the like. And of course, most importantly, that they would understand that whenever they write a paper, it must have, of course, no, it must have citations. It must not only be based, of course, from their own opinion. Right? So what are some outputs, no, that are actually produced by students, no, when using and of course following these academic writing conventions? Of course, we have there 1, essays, 2, research papers, of course, theses for MA students or even for the college students, dissertations for the PhD students, research proposal, no? In the junior high school, we already have a research proposal. Of course, in the senior high school, we have qualitative research, quantitative research. We also have, I think, capstone projects, if I'm not mistaken. Students are also being asked to produce literature reviews, not only in English, but even in other learning areas. Lab reports, no, this is something common in their science classes. Annotated bibliography, of course, no, which is a list of source references, no, somehow it would look like a literature review. This could be done in a table format. I mean, where there is a table that they have, of course, to complete, and then the like. So all these, no, are example of academic texts that would demand students, of course, to observe academic writing conventions. But then again, there are a lot of other types of outputs, no, academic outputs, wherein students, of course, need to observe and follow, of course, no, the rules and regulations, the do's and the don'ts of academic writing, right? So now, let us try to dig deeper. We already know the purposes, we already know the definition, we already know some examples, no, of outputs wherein academic writing is observed. Then now, let us try to talk about the factors, no, that one should consider whenever, of course, he is actually writing. So we have here 4: role, purpose, audience, and format. So of course, for the role, no, actually 1, 2, 3, magkakambal yung tatlo eh, no? Right? Of course, role, we have to understand. Number 1, what is our role there, no? Whenever we're given a task of first to write, what is our role? Let's say, for example, in the context, no, of let's say, for example, if I am a student right now, remember, we have this thing we call GRASP, no? Yung sinasabi natin na whenever we design performance tasks, right? So you have to understand what's the role given to the student. If I am the student, what's my role? Am I writing as a student, or am I writing as if I am a mayor, I'm the president of the country? Because knowing your role, no, would also, of course, allow you to identify how you're going to write. Diba? Meron tayong tinatawag na you're writing, of course, for the people below you, meaning to say you are the authority, you hold power, or you're writing for someone, no, who has a higher position, no, over you. Of course, the way you write that letter, of course, would be different from the first example that I've given. Okay, so that's the first thing that the students need to identify. And as teachers, this is also something that we have to take note of, because remember, in order for us to decide authentic tasks on authentic assessments, what we do is that we give them specific roles, no? Ganun din po. So not only of course in research they are student researchers, no? But of course, let's say for example, you're asking them to create a marketing plan. Either preparing it because you are actually giving them a situation that they are already, for example, professionals, no, who are in the field of public relations, who are of course working as marketing specialists and then the like. Number 2, you have of course to ensure that your instructions would include, no, what is the purpose of writing? Are you asking them to write because you want them to inform and provide details to important data? Or are you asking them to write, for example, this essay because you want them to persuade people? Because persuading, of course, would demand a different way, no, of presenting data first compared to just informing people about a specific topic. Third, of course, do you want to entertain, no? Although, of course, and ako, naniniwala ako if it's informing, persuasion, dapat andun pa rin yung entertainment. But of course, entertainment could be done in different ways, no? And many more. So, as teachers, we also have, of course, to take a look at that one. Third, we have to provide, no, details regarding, of course, who would be the audience of your students. Let's say, for example, if it's an essay, no, are you asking your students to write for senior citizens? Or are you asking your students, for example, to write for their fellow Gen Zs? Because the examples, of course, no, that would be fitting for senior citizens would be definitely different from the examples that would fit, no, of course, the Gen Zs. So in other words, no, audience would identifying who the audience is, of course, is also very important. It's an important factor to be able to come up with an effective, no, write-up. And lastly, of course, the format. It's very important that we clarify, no, what we want, of course, from our students. Even if it's a research paper, no, kailangan malinaw yan. Are they going to follow the IMRAD format? Is it going to be like a library paper? Or are they going to, let's say, for example, what kind of research paper are they going to have? If it's an essay, then what do you expect as well? Of course, they understand that the thesis statement would be placed at the beginning. But then again, how many paragraphs do you expect? How many words, of course, do you expect from them? So these things are very important, no? And whenever we give instructions, whenever we ask our students to write, all these things, of course, should be considered, right? Now, let us try to dig deeper. Let us try, of course, to explore other things when it comes to writing. This, of course, things are very important also in academic writing. Now, let's talk about the myths, no? Okay, about writing. Number 1, the paint by numbers myth. So this is the first fallacy, okay? There are some writers who believe that they must adhere to particular procedures and formats in order to write properly. So, however, we have to understand that yeah, writing correctly no is not really a step-by-step process. I mean, it's not really a linear process. Writing is recursive, meaning to say the same elements are actually cycled through and through, and of course are repeatedly done. As we write, we engage in numerous stages of the writing process. So that's something that we have to consider. Number two, writers only start writing when they have everything. That's not true, no? In fact, whenever you write, the tendency is that you get to gather more ideas, no? Although, of course, it's very important that before you start writing, you read first, no? You'll be exposed to a lot of information, no? But you also have to remember that writers don't start writing until they have, of course, writers rather must not start writing only during the time that they have all the materials, because we have to understand, okay, that we always have to begin writing already, no, regardless of the flaws, regardless of the voids, because writing is a continuous process. Meaning to say, if there are things that should be repaired or that are already damaged, no, in the write-up that we're actually prepared, you can always go back to these things and improve them, no. Because if you're going to wait na you already have all the data and then start writing, matatagalan tayo, no? So of course, sometimes it's nice, of course, that you begin writing and then from there, you'll be able to see the gaps, no? You'll be able to see how you can improve and how can you, of course, improve, of course, your work, no? Specifically the way you write. Okay, number three, of course, perfect first drafts. So it's not true. Okay, this is not true. This does not exist. Initial drafts are never perfect. You have to understand that whenever we write, no, the first time, the first that we're going to write, lalo na yung mga drafts, kaya nga sa tinawag na draft, no? Kasi this is something that we're going to edit. This is something that we're going to revise, no? So, we have to understand that it is something that we should not be doing, placing unrealistic expectations in writing first drafts. It does not mean that if whenever we write, we go back to our drafts, improve them from time to time. It does not mean that it would make us less of a better writer. No, because we have to understand, no, that these are actually drafts, so these things can be improved. Kaya nga may tinatawag din na incubation period, di ba? It's best, of course, that you finish the task ahead of time, so that, let's say, for example, you leave it for a few days, and then you try to take a look at it. I'm pretty sure you're going to see errors. You're going to see how you can improve them, no? Pag nagkaroon na ng incubation period. So, again, let's stop placing a lot of pressure, no, sa sarili natin on fulfilling an impossible task, which is, of course, making first drafts perfect. Number four, some got it, I don't, the genius fallacy. In other words, no, our thinking that some people are gifted writers, but some are not, no. That's, of course, also a fallacy. If you think that you're not a good writer, if you think that your skills cannot be improved, if you think that this is beyond control, then that is going to be a huge problem. Okay? It's not, how I have to, if you're going to ask me, yeah, truth be told, no, those, for example, who write often, they are the better writers, no? May mga tao talagang sabihin natin na maganda ang vocabulary and then the like, which would allow them, of course, to express their thoughts more freely. But then again, you also have to understand that everyone has the capacity to improve all their skills, including the writing skills, no? But if you think that you cannot do it, then most likely you would not really be able, of course, to succeed. You have to understand that through effort, through practice, through studying, no, through hard work, writing is a skill that can be further developed and honed. Okay, number five, good grammar is good writing. Somehow, this is true. But then again, you have to understand that good writing is not only the basis of good writing is not only the grammar, but of course the content, no? Effective writing, of course, would also have you should be able to achieve, no, the purpose, no, of your of doing, of course, that specific paper. It should be able, of course, to address, no, the gaps, and of course it should be able to fulfill, no, the expectations and of course the things that your audience look for, no, in your paper. Okay, number 6, the 5-paragraph essay. Some people actually consider this one as the best way to write, no? Nasabi nila, 1 paragraph for introduction, 3 paragraph for supporting ideas, and 1 paragraph for conclusion. But then again, somehow, if we're going to take a look at it, this format is applicable, but it must not really be observed strictly at all times because it would limit you. No, ako po, personally, if you're going to ask me, hindi rin ako naniniwala sa 3-paragraph rule na introduction, body, conclusion. Siguro, whenever you're teaching elementary students, this is a good start, no? Ako kasi personally, I don't limit, no, the creativity of my students whenever I ask them to write. So they can produce a 7-paragraph essay, a 6-paragraph essay. But what's important is that each paragraph would contain a specific controlling idea, and that the paragraphs, of course, would be connected to one another as well. Yung organization, of course, would also be considered. And number 7, never use I. Again, gaya po ng binanggit ko kanina, in academic writing, I should never be used. Okay, because using I, no, expresses that, of course, this idea, no, ay, of course, product of informal writing. So again, the formal possession of objectivity must be observed. So that's why you have to avoid using I. Okay, instead, of course, make use of the third person. Okay, so those are the 7, no, common myths about writing. Okay, so now that we know, of course, these things, and of course, all these things we have to avoid. Now, let us talk about the things that you have to prioritize. Ano naman po yung kailangan yung i-prioritize, no, as writers? So, to improve your academic writing skills, you should be able to prioritize these 3 areas. Okay, 1 is clear writing. We say clear writing, dapat well-written ang output nyo. No, thinking precedes writing, and skilled authors spend time distilling and analyzing literature prior to writing. In other words, no, you have to read a lot before you start writing, because if you write without reading, you know, if you write without you knowing what you're going to put there, then that's really going to be a problem, no? You can also prepare outlines, no, because this would also help you, of course, in organizing your thoughts, your ideas. Okay, number 2, excellent grammar. This has been reiterated already, no, because good grammar would really improve, no, your writing. Okay, so that's why it's very important that you try your best to master the fundamentals of English grammar. Although it would require years of study, diba? Since elementary, no, we're being taught with regards to the use of the English language, specifically in subject-verb agreement, no. So we have, of course, to try our best to master the major and the minor aspects of grammar. No, of course, we also try our best to write following the feedback given to us by our teachers, and of course, if needed, of course, we seek assistance, no. And ako personally, there are also a lot of tools that you can make use of, like for example, Grammarly, no. This is something that you can use, no, of course, to check and to allow you, of course, to proofread your paper later on, no, yung mga punctuation errors, capitalization errors, spelling errors, and then the like. And number 3, consistent stylistic approach. So later, no, mamaya pag-uusapan natin ano ba yung mga stylistic elements ng academic writing. But here, let's try to focus first on the first word, which is consistency. So here is very important that whenever you write, no, specifically sa research paper, dapat consistent ka. So let's say, for example, sa umpisa, no, you use in-text citations. Dapat hanggang dulo may in-text citations ka. If your teachers require you to use footnotes, dapat hanggang dulo, of course, you make use of it. Hindi lang isang part, no? Because it would enhance, no, the readability component, and of course the flow of your paper. So that's why, of course, kailangan, of course, it's really a must that you observe consistency. But when it comes to the stylistic approach, no, what are the stylistic elements of academic writing? Here are the following. Number 1, ayan po, the big picture. So academic writing, unlike creative or journalistic writing, it's really more formal and logical. Okay, the components must be cohesive and arranged logically to form a single entity. Okay, understanding is enhanced by narrative connections between sentences and paragraphs. And of course, it's very important that there would always be citations from the beginning up until the end. Number 2 would have to be the tone. Okay, text tone represents the attitude of your paper. Okay, and of course, you have to be able to present your arguments of course, in a fair and in a very narrative manner. you have to utilize neutral language when refuting a position or argument because academic writing requires the use of credible sources. That's why you have to utilize neutral and non-confrontational language in your arguments. All right, so number 3 is diction. So for diction, of course, this refers to word selection. So that's why you have to understand that similar sounding words, of course, have different meanings. And this is particularly true in academic writing where words and terminologies can have nuanced meaning. So it's very important that you try to avoid general terms. And of course, you try to use context if you cannot do so, of course, to avoid confusing the readers. Okay? Number 4 is language. So it's very important, especially in doing research in the field of social sciences, you have to understand that you should use a simplified language, a simple language. This is not the time for you, of course, to use a lot of highfalutin terms because it would only hinder your audience, of course, your viewers to understand what you're trying to say. However, at the same time, if of course we're talking about the language, we can talk about the organization. It's very important that the paragraphs are well structured and that you can also prepare an outline, where of course you have the thesis statement and of course the topic sentences per paragraph. Use of course formal and direct language. Okay? Number 5, punctuation. Ito, paulit-ulit ko na pong sinasabi kanina pa, Academic writing employs accurate language and punctuation to establish, of course, the clear tone and, of course, to be able to achieve the purpose of that specific writing that specific paper. Number 6 would have to be the academic conventions. Of course, this would contain the in-text citations, the footnotes, the endnotes. You have to cite ideas, of course, cite a lot of research papers. You have to paraphrase, of course, everything that you're going to say. Even if you're trying to put in text citation, it is a must that you still paraphrase them. And towards the end, of course, do not forget, of course, to include all the resources that you are going to use, of course, in your reference list. Number 7, evidence-based reasoning. So academic writing, of course, requires logic supported by evidence. If this is not going to be supported with evidence, with factual information, then it would be considered as an opinion. It would be biased writing. And of course, academic writing is not like that. So that's why it's very important that you always cite sources akin to bolster your claim. If you notice, talaga may pagkakahawig, may connection talaga, of course, yung stylistic elements that I'm trying, of course, to highlight to you right now. Number 8, would have to be thesis-driven. So academic writing begins with the formulation, the demonstration, or the refutation, of course, of the research questions. So if we talk about thesis, if we talk about research writing, then we can never let go of the research questions or the research objectives. We have to understand that would show, of course, what we need to do, what we need to, of course, gather, and what we need, of course, to analyze and answer in that specific research paper. And number 9, complexity and higher order thinking skills, or the HOTS. So complex issues are addressed, of course, in academic writing. And this would demand a lot of the higher order cognitive skills, of course, to comprehend, to, of course, solve these problems, to articulate concepts, and then the like. So this is, of course, also considered one of the stylistic elements of academic writing. So these are the 9 stylistic elements, the ones that are really common, commonly observed, of course, in academic writing. Okay? So now allow me to give you more tips, that you can, of course, observe in doing an academic paper. Okay? Number 1, the excessive use of personal pronouns, may lead the reader to conclude that the study was excessively subjective. Just like what I told you earlier, you have to avoid using first person and second person, of course, pronouns. Okay, you can make use of the third person. However, of course, we have to understand that these things are really necessary to be observed, primarily because it would help your readers to really ensure that the way, of course, that you're writing, of course, was objectively done. Okay, and of course, was not just subjective. No, of course, no, you did. I mean, you have clear basis when it comes to your opinion. Number two, avoid using commands like do this and do that. So the directives. Okay, of course, this could be part of the recommendations, no, but part of the study. But then again, still you have to avoid, of course, doing this specific things, no. Okay, number three, a tone that is conversational and employs slang and idioms. Academic, of course, writing demands flawless grammar and sentence structure. So again, just like what I told you at the first part, no, of the session, which I've talked where I talk about formal writing. So as informal writing, no, idiomatic expressions, slang, figurative language, no, of course, simile, metaphor, and then the like, personification. You have to avoid all these things. So instead, be direct and of course concise. Okay, speaking of being concise, you have to concentrate on this one, no, to be able to avoid ambiguous language. Wordiness should also be considered, no, because this reduces the likelihood that your readers, reviewers will misunderstand your paper and your study. Okay, next, succinctness in writing requires avoiding vague references to people, places, and things. So vague expressions, this is also something that you have to observe, no. Be careful, no, when it comes to using this thing. So be on the lookout for and revise any context-free. Okay, ambiguous statements, of course, as you try to proofread your paper towards the end. And then there are bulleted and numbered lists. List and bulleted items should only be used when the narrative requires clarity. No, in academic writing, however, this must be followed. No, yeah, you can have lists and bullets, but then again, you always have to understand that this should be followed by a comprehensive explanation and analysis of each item in the list or in the bulleted list, no, that you're actually going to cite in your paper. Okay? Let's have two more tips, no? Describing a research problem is an essential means of contextualizing a study. In fact, some description is required because you cannot assume the reader has a comprehensive understanding of the topic. Remember, my dear teachers, no, whenever we do research papers, whenever we write, no, a paper, even if it's not a research paper, any form of academic writing instead, no, we have to understand that we write because we want to ensure that our audience, our readers will be able to understand us. So in other words, we cannot just assume, no, that they already know this specific concepts. That's why it should be done, no, in a manner that is expository. No, so you have, of course, to explain things clearly. No, you have to provide background information. You have to provide descriptions, okay, that would allow them, of course, to clearly understand what you're actually discussing and presenting in your paper. And lastly, using personal experience can be an effective way to engage your audience in comprehending the research issue. Academic writing relies on research-based evidence, so only personal experience may be used as an illustration. To do otherwise would barely be, of course, telling a story. Alright, so those are some of the things, no, of course, that you have to be reminded, no, whenever we talk about academic writing. Now, let us talk about the do's and the don'ts of academic writing. Okay, so more tips, no, in order for you, of course, to really understand how to observe, no, this academic writing conventions. So number one, utilize a simple, plain style. So, of course, how do you do this one? Avoid using highfalutin language. Of course, you can use the jargon from time to time, but you have to avoid flowery language at all costs. When possible, no, you can even get rid of your thesaurus, no, and make use, of course, of the single language, because this would allow your audience to really understand what you're trying to say. Number two, vary your sentence structure. It cannot be, for example, in one paragraph, 3 simple sentences, 3 compound sentences. There should be variation, right? So, because it would allow your readers to avoid feeling exhausted, no, after reading your sentences. Let's say, for example, very long sentences, so string of lengthy sentences with multiple causes. Mapapagod yung readers mo yan. So, it's very important that you also observe variation in terms of the length, the way the sentences are being constructed, and of course, the thoughts are being expressed. Number 3, use consistent tenses. At the beginning po, no, let's say for example in the methodology part of your research paper, of course you have to write it in future tense, no, because you haven't done it. Let's say for example for the research proposal, but remember towards the end everything should be written in the past tense because you have already done it, no, except of course if there are things that, let's say for example, things that should be of course expressed in present tense, like the general facts, the general truth, and then the line. Okay, so you have to understand that the future tense, no, is rarely used once of course you're done with the paper already. Okay, kadalasan talaga past tense ang nagagamit natin dito, and of course again you have to use consistent tenses, lalo na po if of course this specific verbs, no, are found, no, in one specific sentence. Okay, number 4, before submitting your paper, have it reviewed by a second person. This is something that you can do. You can always ask for feedback, not only from your research advisor, but also, of course, no, from other people, because you have to understand that each of us, no, we're extremely invested in our own ideas. And the tendency is that we tend, of course, to look for our own style in the papers that we're actually checking. So most probably, no, this would be, of course, on your advantage as well, especially if you get to have someone, of course, who's really good, no, in terms of observing the academic writing conventions. Okay, so that of course it would be easier, no. The errors, of course, would definitely be lessened. Number 5, use a neutral tone. Why? Because by definition, academic writing is factual, logical, unemotional, precise, no? And of course, something that would always observe brevity. Therefore, you have to avoid distorting factual information with personal biases, or of course, so the tendency to be controlled by your emotions, no? Bias information when stating the fact. So again, use a neutral tone. Okay? Because you're not only basing these things from your own experience, but you're basing these things from studies that have already been done, no, in the past. Number 6, write clearly. Okay, clarity should always take precedence, no, because the purpose of academic writing is to ensure that your analysis and that your entire research paper is presented in a manner that is simple to be understood, and of course, so simple to comprehend, so that of course your ideas, everything that you're presenting, will be able to, kumbaga, will be understood clearly, no, by your target audience. Okay. And number 7, something that you have to do not only once you're done with the paper, but siguro for every part of the paper, this is something that you can do from time to time. Proofread. Proofread thoroughly. I understand, no, that sometimes pagod na tayo, di ba? We think that we have typed everything that we need to say without committing errors. But then again, sometimes, lalo na ako, for example, nagtatype ako, minsan nagugulat ako, ang dami ko palang typographical errors. But when I was typing it, no, I really think that everything was done correctly. No, but when I go back to it, di ba, ang dami ko palang mali. Kunwari, nagte-text ako, nagchat-chat ako, no. What more when we're doing a research paper where we're really, of course, no, using our mind, talaga yung brain cells natin napapagod. Kaya mahalaga po yung sinabi ko kanina, yung tinatawag nating incubation period, no. That's something, of course, that you can do for you to be able to proofread, no, your work well. Number 8, structure your academic success. Okay, so long, winding sentences are always uncomfortable to read, regardless of the intended audience. So this is particularly important, of course, in doing research papers or scientific papers, because the language that you're going to, of course, observe, no, dapat po precise and clear. That's why you have to structure your academic sentences well. Dapat hindi vague, hindi deceptive, hindi ambiguous, no. So dapat ang emphasis mo ay, ang pinapahalagahan mo, of course, would always be the clarity, no, over yung other specific manners, other specific things that you can consider, no, when choosing a specific word or language, no, that you're going to observe in your paper. Okay? And now that we're done with the do's, let me give you some of the don'ts of academic writing. Number 1, this has been repeated already, no? Pero ipapaalala ko po, do not use first-person pronouns. Okay? You have to understand that this is a big no-no in academic writing. And of course, aside from the first-person pronouns, do not use contractions. Okay? Because contractions no would be products of informal writing. Number 3, avoid using obsolete terms already. So you have to be updated also no of the standard English no that you're going to write, specifically if you're writing, of course, your academic paper using the English language. Number 4, don't use slang language. No, it's not the time for you to be very creative in using slang terms, idiomatic expressions, and then the like. No, so these are all things, of course, the products of informal writing. Number 5, do not use cliche. Okay, so this is something also that is considered vague. Okay, and at times, overused na din po ito. Okay, number 6, do not also make use of qualifiers like really, very, certainly, often, hopefully, basically, because this would contain emotions. Remember, in academic writing, dapat very objective, no? So to avoid and remove subjectivity, not using qualifiers also would make your paper more effective and more concise. And number 7, last one, avoid using redundant scholarly phrases. So never use, for example, the term, I will do this in my paper, or this would be done. For example, I will be, let's say, for example, I will be asking my audience about this. Of course, you're not only just using the first person point of view, but your pronoun, and of course, but these are also scholarly phrases that you have to avoid already. Okay, so these are things that you have to take note of when it comes to doing academic writing. All right. So hopefully, the things that I've presented to you today, the do's and the don'ts of academic writing. I gave you some tips, the purposes of academic writing, the definition of academic writing, the differences of formal and informal writing, and many more. I hope that all these things would be, of course, helpful for you, okay, to produce a better paper in the near future, right? So it's almost time. So I think it would be best if I end this webinar with a quote that would best summarize everything that I presented today. Okay, so if we talk about academic writing, if we talk about research, it could be simply ended. We could simply end, of course, this specific session with this quote: research is formalized curiosity. When we do research, of course, there are a lot of things that we wish to investigate. There are a lot of things that we wish to explore. But then again, research can never be done just by putting things that we have in mind. Because always, research is something that make use of the formal language. And formal language, of course, this referred to the academic writing conventions. So if we really want to come up with a good paper, then we have to understand that the way we write, the way we present our thoughts and ideas, this is very important for us to be able to succeed. Of course, in fulfilling our research goals and, of course, objectives. All right. So once again, I hope that today's session is very helpful for you. Should you have questions, you can contact me at jcorquera@vibalgroup.com. Thank you so much, everyone, and good afternoon.
There we have it. In behalf of Bibal Group Incorporated, I would like to thank our speaker for today for his eye-opening and insightful learning session. It is an honor to have you with us. And to all our Kavibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. Don't forget to register to get your e-certificate of participation. The link is in the caption of this webinar. We encourage you also to subscribe and watch on our official Bibal Facebook and YouTube channel. Muli, maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat.